By the end of this lesson, you should learn how to cite sources by doing two separate tasks. One, creating a works cited page, and two, creating internal citations. So first, we're going to play a game. I'm going to give you a quote, and I want you to see if you know who is the person that said it. Boys only want love if it's torture. Was it WWF wrestler Sasha Banks? Or was it Taylor Swift pop singer? Well, you're going to find out pretty soon. Who is the person who said, I cannot tell a lie? Was it our first president, George Washington, or our 42nd president, Bill Clinton? Let's find out a little bit later. Elementary, my dear Watson. Was that a quote from the detective in the fictional series of Sherlock Holmes, or was that something that Robert Downey Jr., the actor, said? Well, keep listening because you're going to find out soon enough. People thought me bad before, but if I ever get free, I'll let them know what bad means. Was that the outlaw and murderer Billy the Kid from the Wild West, or was that something from the Joker and the Batman villain? I cook, I create, I'm incredibly excited by what I do. I've still got a lot to achieve. So was that a quote from Gordon Ramsay, who's the host of Kitchen Nightmares, or the quote from Martha Stewart, cook and food author? I bet you're dying to know, so let's find out. So our first one was about Taylor Swift, and it was about teasing boys in the song Blank Page. George Washington used his famous line to fess up to his dad, hey, I chopped down the cherry tree. Sherlock Holmes is the character that said it. Downey Jr. is just the actor. Billy the Kid was arrested when he told the constable who arrested him that if they ever let him out, he would continue his crime spree. And believe it or not, Gordon Ramsay is the one that's quoted to say that. And it's kind of hard to believe since usually we hear him insulting or cursing people out. But that was a moment where he actually had something positive to say about his cooking. So that's why we need to give credit where it's due. If someone's saying something positive or outstanding, they got to get credit for doing that. And our writing is the same way. Obviously, we wanted to use those words to make our writing even better, or maybe we couldn't find a way to put them in our own words. So when we create our works cited page, we definitely want to make sure that we are alphabetically arranging our works cited. We want to have 2 to 3 reliable sources for this activity, and we want to make sure that it's correctly formatted. So we want to use a hanging indent, which means that it's also a reverse paragraph style. And we want to make sure that it has double spacing. We also want to make sure that it's not just a link. We want to make sure that it has required parts. So what's the title of the page? What's the title of the website? What date was this published on? And what date did we electronically access it? So your works cited page is actually going to go at the separate page at the end of your essay. So this is what a works cited page looks like. So if you notice at the top where I'm kind of circling, you can see that it says works cited. It's centered at the top. You can see that I'm using a hanging indent. So my first line is not indented, but every other line in that entry is. And that's kind of a reverse paragraph. You can notice that I begin either with the author's last name, like Buchanan, or I'm beginning with the title of the article, which is Developments in the Law of Marriage and Family. And as you can see, starting from B and going the whole way to M, this is alphabetically arranged. So there are many tools that you can use, so feel free to use any of them, but I would suggest you use EasyBib because I think that is much easier to use, but you might have to use the app. So one of the things that we learned from last marking period is that you have some information that will automatically be cited for you, like the article title, the URL, the website title, and the date accessed. But EasyBib will tell you, hey, we're missing information. And a lot of times it's going to be asking you for the publisher or sponsor. And you can find that at the bottom of a page and you're looking for the copyright information. So whatever name is beside it, that's your publisher. You also are going to look for the date published, and that's usually at the bottom. If it's not at the bottom, it might be at the top. So, your first task, you're going to do two. Your first task before you continue with this little presentation is to make sure you're creating your works cited page and saving it to either Google Docs or Notability. You're not going to email it to me because you're going to save it for a little bit later. And it says if you need help, obviously come see me because I'll be more than happy to sit with you and help you make sure you have all of that correct. So, says who, says what? Another way to avoid plagiarism is to tell people which details came from which source. And this is called parenthetical citations or internal citations or in-text citations. You're going to hear me saying internal or parenthetical citations. So, remember when we did our gorillas in crisis and one of the requirements was that you were supposed to put the paragraph? That's because that was helping you locate the information. And when you put that information, I found it in paragraph 1. I found it in paragraph 1, 3, and 4. That's showing that you are able to locate the information, and it also allows your reader to check up on you. So that's important, and that's what the purpose of parenthetical citations are. So, when you include your internal or parenthetical citations, it has to match your works cited. So, you have to include the author's last name or the title of the source. And that was one of the requirements I asked you to do when we were taking our notes earlier this week. So, there are two types of internal citations. First of all, you can use the author's name within the quote. At one point, Kofer writes, "Growing up in a large urban center, I suffer from what I think of as a cultural schizophrenia." So if you notice, I don't have this first part in quotations because that's what I'm paraphrasing. Then I have a comma, and then what I have next is what is actually taken right from the website that I'm borrowing information from. The reason I have a dot, dot, dot is because I'm not using the whole entire quote. I'm just taking the pieces I need. So I have dot, 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 I suffered from, and then at the end where it says schizophrenia, I put my period and I end my quote. Now, in my second example, I'm not going to put the author's name in there, but what I'm going to do is put the author's name at the end of my quote. So it says, on the other side, many Americans expressed surprise at the frequency which French people spoke about money. So if you notice, I put Carol in parentheses after my quote, then I put my period. If you were using a book, you would put your page number, but since none of the resources we've used are books, we don't need to put that for today. If for some reason you did not have an author's name, then what you would do instead is you would put the title of the website. So if you look here, let's say that I didn't have Carol. Let's say that the title of the website was Americans and Tourism. So what I would do instead is I would actually put the title right there instead. Okay, so a general rule. When you are writing your essay, no more than 25% of your paper should be direct quotations. In the elementary school, I know that your teachers have told you that you want to put everything in quotes. And the reason your teachers told you to do that is because you were still learning, and it was easier to tell you to do that before. But now that you're in middle school, we want to get you away from that habit, and we want to get you to paraphrase. So when we're paraphrasing, we want to paraphrase as much as possible. And that's why we use some things that are directly quoted and some things that are somewhat quoted, but then somewhat in our own words. So if you can't put the author's words in your own words because maybe it's going to lose the meaning, or maybe it's a statistic or an original theory or idea, then that's a good idea for you to use your quotes. So for my first example, I said, according to Smith, 65% of more shelter dogs are deemed aggressive or socially inept. So notice what I have in purple is what I wasn't able to paraphrase, but everything else was in my own words. Then my second example says, wild animals should remain free. And you can see that I put the author's name there. So those would be exactly what you would need to do for your internal citations. So remember, your internal citations have to match your works cited. So on my right page here, this is my works cited. You can see all of my sources that I've used. And then over here, you can see author's name. And that author's name has to match what's over here. So we have an author here, and if you follow the arrow, you're going to see that that matches there. When you're using your internal citations, you want to use transition words to kind of lead into that. So you would say things like the author acknowledges, Smith declares. So if you look there, in the words of researchers Long and Mackenzie, or as Paul Rutnick had noted, Melinda Stewart, mother of a child killed by a drunk driver, points out, or writes Michelle Moore. So notice, no matter what I'm using, there's a lot of words that we can use, but the word I never want to see you using is the author says, because the author is not speaking, the author is communicating in written form. So let's practice and see how well you know this. So if this was my works cited entry, which internal citation would be correct? Would it be number 1, where I'm paraphrasing and then I'm including the first name and the last name? Would it be number 2, where I'm including the citation in the beginning, but also using the author's last name at the end? Or would it be number 3, where I'm just using the author's last name and the first name because I want it to match my works cited? Think about it. Your correct answer is number 2. So number 2 is a great example because you're putting according to, and then you're going back to where you found this information. And you're also putting the author's name, which also matches your works cited. So if you got that answer right, give yourself a pat on the back and say, good job, buddy. Now, let's try another example. So if this was our works cited entry, how would we write the internal citation? If I say, James Monroe claims that Japan has a natural beauty that is both inspirational and picturesque. So in parentheses, I want to include information. So would I include just the author's name? Would I include the title of the resource that I got, which is in quotation marks here? Would it be the author's last name and first name, or would it be the author's first name and last name? So think about it. And your correct answer is number 1. You only need the author's last name. If there's no author, then you would just put the title of your resource, which you would see I'm putting in quotation marks. Great job if you got that one right. Give yourself a high five. All right, so now you're ready for your second task. Your second task is you were supposed to take research notes, and I told you to have them ready so that you could insert them into your essay. So what you're going to do is you're going to practice using internal citations. So this year, 7th graders are learning how to use internal citations. So I'm not expecting you to have this perfect, so don't stress out. I'm not looking for you to master this skill, but what I am looking for is that you are attempting to try this skill and using the skills and the strategies I taught you, the author's name or the transition words or anything else that was mentioned in here. So next year when you get into 8th grade, you're going to learn how to incorporate them more meaningfully. So have fun, try your best, and once again, if you do need help, I'll be available during Flex.